Hello and welcome to the show. Now a new Forza game is out and that means we have one very, very important question to ask. And that of course is, will it roll? Now naturally I figured we'd start off with conditions that I expected to be able to get a car to roll. Sebring and with the Holden Ute that is notorious for falling over in the rain. It didn't disappoint. Immediately tumbling over before I even got to a corner that I realised had a curb on at all. Yeah, that was the that was the Holden Ute over. Now the car has been modified to kind of force a roll, if you like. It has race tyres, crazy amounts of camber, incredibly stiff suspension. The kind of rolls that we are trying to do here is all about grip rolls. You use a curb to help bounce the car up onto its side, and then it has more than enough grip to pull itself over. Now we have seen these rolls in the past, and yeah, the Holden Ute was having no issues. It was having more issues getting off the wall than it was having issues with rolling over. This I wasn't particularly surprised by, to say the least. The Holden quite notorious for tumbling around when it comes to the perhaps the ease in which this went over. You know, having gone over at a corner where I didn't even know there was a curb, just taking some of these corners normally was causing the vehicle a few issues. Now, this is a vehicle that is set up to roll off curbs. It's not like the jelly cars that I've built in the past, cars that are designed to roll just simply by going around a corner on its own. This is designed to roll off of a curb, which it would do off of just about any single curb you drove the car across. Anywhere you put this car across a curb with a little bit of steering, and that was basically it for the Holden. It would go over, it would tumble very spectacularly. So, to answer the question, yes, it will roll. However, what happens when we go to slightly less optimum cars? Always knew the Holden was likely to go over. What happens if we try something like the VW Tuareg? Now, it is still a relatively high-riding SUV, however, perhaps not quite as top-heavy as we saw from the Holden Ute, and the first run was not massively convincing. Again, gone for race tyres, race suspension. You see the roll cage in it, and anti-roll bars are set as maximum, so stiffen the car up as much as possible. And there was a little bit more promise on the second run through these curbs, across these corners. It was kind of just about bouncing itself up onto two wheels. We then had a really long two-wheeled moment that didn't quite come off for the Tuareg, but there was progress. Progress was being made. I was kind of finding the right lines, the right approach to take in hitting these curbs. It doesn't fall over immediately like the Holden would, however, it was getting closer. Again, another big two-wheeled moment, but not quite enough. You kind of had to have the car going very, very straight, and then at the very last second as you approach the curb, you kind of turn and you turn hard, and that is what was causing the Tuareg to get up onto a two-wheels. Now, you could still miss and get yourself into trouble. However, that was the best way that I was finding for it to work, and sure enough, a couple of runs later, and the Tuareg would go over. Not the most spectacular of tumbles from the Volkswagen, however, it was over. Also, it turns out that with this setup, it doesn't really do very good celebratory donuts. It's kind of a, yeah, it's sort of a celebratory-ish donut. No, handling-wise, these cars are terrible because they're just designed to try and fall over. I actually managed to get it to go the other way across that curb as well as a long two-wheel moment. A little bit more of a spectacular tumble this time as well for the Tuareg. But that was quite promising. That was quite promising from the Volkswagen. Yeah, it was a little bit, as I said, still a relatively higher riding SUV. However, it went over without too much issue. Now, I did wonder if there may be some other curbs potential for rolling of cars. Turn 1 at Hockenheim. Now, of course, the Hockenheim has the rain. Turn 1 at Hockenheim was an area that I was very keen to explore. There is a very large sausage curb on the inside that I was hoping to be able to launch the vehicle off. The problem with Forza 7 is a lot of the curbs are now quite flat, which for rolling cars doesn't help because I need something to lever the car up into the air. While the sausage curb does that, it levers the car up into the air. When you hit it, it slows it down slightly. You kind of clonk the front of the car. I don't quite know what it is that it hits on that. But, yeah, you kind of hit that and you lose all your momentum. Any chance... Well, you don't have to be going necessarily very fast to roll a car. You still need to have some momentum going across there. And, yeah, as soon as you hit that orange bit, it just kills all the momentum. It's kind of close with the vehicle getting up on its side, but not quite close enough. I did wonder if any of these other curbs might cause any potentials for the Tuareg, but again, we run into the same issue. The same issue I was having a lot. We try to find a place to do this. The curbs are just too flat. The curbs are, well, funnily enough, quite sensible curbs, and when it comes to rolling cars, I need something a little bit more extreme, something a little bit nastier. It just doesn't work around these corners. A bit of a shame. A bit of a shame. Indeed, not only do we need a perfect curve, we also actually need a good enough run-up area as well to approach it. We need to be able to take a little bit of speed, and we need to be able to have kind of multiple lines of approach, etc., which you just don't get. I mean, it bounced the car a little bit onto two wheels through that final section, but nowhere near close enough to getting the Tuareg over. Maple Valley was another place that I had high hopes for, a track notorious for vehicles falling over in Forza 4, has held host to the fewest cars finishing a versus community because of rolls. I think it is two cars finished a versus the community race here because of vehicles tumbling out. However, the chicane, so notorious for rolling cars, is not going to be a rolling location. The curbs are, again, perfectly flat. The curbs are perfectly flat, and it's just, yeah, you can't hit it with any force because there's nothing there to hit. The most likely location is the final corner, funnily enough. Quite a scary place to be trying to launch a car to roll. It's a tough corner at the best of times. There is a bit of a heftier curb on the inside. There are a couple of issues with this one, though. When you're coming down the hill, the wall is very, very close to the wall. It's very difficult to judge. Your best bet is when you are going back up the hill. The problem then you have is that while you can hit the curb and get the car onto two wheels, because the road then suddenly goes uphill so quickly, the steepness, the elevation change there actually causes problem for getting the car to roll over. If it suddenly dipped away, I think it would be better. If rather than going uphill, you hit the curb and then the road was going downhill, I think this might be a possible spot. You see, on this particular attempt, it's just, yeah, the road surface there is not helping matters, going essentially the wrong way around Maple Valley and being so tight to the wall for the run the correct way through the course. It just doesn't quite work, certainly nowhere near as well as the Sebring curb. So, having settled on that this was about as good as it was going to get once more, I was curious to see what would happen in the dry. You see, from previous Forza games, rolling cars was only possible in the wet, or with the odd exception, but it had to be a really silly vehicle to roll over in the dry. The problem that we have is that while these are essentially grip rolls that I'm managing to do with the car, just being levered up by a curb, when we're in the dry, yes, we have more grip than on the wet surface. There is some weird Forza force, that's just the name that we are going to give it, that stops cars from rolling over. Now, the Tuareg gets onto two wheels, it gets quite far onto two wheels here. Easier in the dry. It gets quite a long way and quite consistently across multiple curbs. The problem is, as soon as it gets up on its side, some part of the game stops it from going over. Exactly what we saw in Forza 6. It's, again, not even a great line across that one particularly. You still attack it, still going to get up onto its side, but it's not going to go over. So, time to experiment with some different cars. The Shelby Omni happens to be one that I had in my garage and was keen to have a little bit of a play around with this one. Again, race tyres, maximum tyre widths, full on the camber, the roll cage, etc. Everything that can get the car as stiff as possible is good for getting the vehicle to try, hopefully, and tumble over. Wasn't an amazingly good first pass. Admittedly, on some of the first passes, I wonder if tyres are not quite up to temperature yet. And again, because these are kind of being assisted by grip, while, okay, trying to roll the car, tyre temperature a little bit less important, still, it's something that I do wonder about the first attempts. So the first attempts are quite poor. Sure enough, the next run is a big roll, actually a very, very spectacular tumble for the for the Dodge Omni there. It's kind of what I was hoping for. At this point, it was looking promising. It was looking very promising. That's a big tumble, relatively straightforwardly across that curb. I mean, it's not even probably the primary curb, if you like. The one that we hit there is actually a relatively flat curb. I was expecting the part that we're about to go and hit now that does kind of have a little bit more of a lip here, a little bit of a thicker curb to be where we would see the car go over. Sure enough, it's not too difficult to get the Omni to go for a tumble there. And it does tumble bloody well. I will give it that. It really does go for a rather spectacular tumble. A little bit awkward to actually get cars righted on Forza 7, but there we go. Yeah, no problems whatsoever getting this little hatchback to go for a tumble. I played around with it a little bit more. It was incredibly consistent with the results. Near enough every curb at every angle down here it was going for the big old tumbles. We've got some more rolls for good luck. Yeah, it was. That was actually a little bit of a strange one. It was kind of on two wheels for a little while before it then suddenly let go. I was curious, seeing how well this car had tumbled in the rain. Would this be able to go for a tumble in the dry? Possibly. Certainly gets far enough up onto two wheels, and the amount of grip that it has does cause the car some issues around the curbs. And it will actually get up onto two wheels just from changing direction. It doesn't even have to be curb assisted. But it's not going to roll. Even with all of the spectacular tumbles that the car did in the wet, even though it is getting so far up onto two wheels, it isn't going to roll. Because, yeah, Forza Force once more will drag the car back down. Now, I say it isn't going to roll through a set of circumstances. If you can hit a big enough curb hard enough, it may be possible. Again, in Forza 6 we did see that to an extent. There were a couple of places where you hit stuff hard enough, and if you're very lucky, you might get it to tumble over. But it was, yeah, very much as we had seen. Forza Force in full effect. It was off to try and experiment with something else. Now, I hadn't expected the Omni to be so easy to roll. I didn't think it was going to be a massive challenge getting that thing to go over. However, I didn't quite expect it to be as easy as it had ended up. Mazda RX-7, much, much lower sports car than the hatchback. And this would start to show some of the problems. You see, in the Tuareg, in the Dodge, it had been okay to get the cars up onto two wheels across these two curbs. You could hit them hard enough, and the cars would go up onto their side. The RX-7, however, was having absolutely none of it. I could hit the curbs as hard as I liked, and it was barely even lifting the wheels off the ground. Now, I've got the wide body kit on this to try and give the car as big a tyres as possible, to try and give it as much grip as possible. Now, I will admit, you might notice, I didn't put the roll cage in. I forgot to install the roll cage. While we have the race suspension and the race anti-roll bars and all of that set to as stiff as possible, the suspension as high as possible, and so on, I hadn't put the roll cage in the car. I hadn't realised as I was doing this. There was absolutely, though, it just wasn't getting up onto two wheels through any of these curbs. It was having no interest in even lifting the wheels off the ground. That was about as far as it got to getting the car up on its side. That's not good when it comes to rolling. This is taking the lines, you know, that worked with the Tuareg, that worked with the Omni, and yeah, it wasn't having any of it. When I went back, it was like the next day when I realised I hadn't put the roll cage in. So I put the roll cage in the car, I put a wing on the car, again, tried to give it downforce in the hope that, you know, it's just more grip that I could try and get through the corners. I could maybe carry a little bit more speed or attack corners a little bit more vigorously, that sort of thing, in the hope that it might work. But through those first two normal corners, there was absolutely nothing from the RX-7. There's just not enough of a bump to launch a car like this up onto its side. It's just not interested. However, there is another curb that can cause some interesting side effects. Now, annoyingly, the replay camera is awful for this particular curb. However, I don't quite know what it is about this area, but if you hit it just right, it will bounce the car over. Now, this is a relatively flat curb. In fact, it's just a normal curb that we're running across, but if you hit it at just the right angle, it can send a car over. The RX-7, after these openings, certainly on the showing through these particular corners, the corners that I would normally go to for rolling cars, I thought this would never ever go over because it's not even getting up onto its side. But at the sort of tertiary curb, shall we say, that is where it was showing some promise. So it was on to another vehicle. Actually, I had a little bit of a play around with the weather. I had been doing everything with the Mazda in heavy rain, everything previous as well in heavy rain. I went to light rain to try and get rid of some of the puddles, primarily the puddles running towards, well, the corner that we rolled the RX-7 off, because you try and take wonky lines around there. There's a fair few puddles. I didn't want to get a car caught in those, but I still needed a wet track. The Camaro, like the RX-7, showed no interest. It just about bounced its way onto two wheels, but really nothing. Even with that big curb, you could hit it as hard as you liked. didn't care a single bit across there. What did the trick, once more, finding the right angle, bouncing the car across. And it's like the secondary. It's the secondary bounce. It seems to be you hit the inside, it lifts the car up a little bit. If you can get it to come back down and then hit the curb again, that's what then launches it and rolls it over. I don't know why. No, I don't know why. And also, you know, the fact that the Camaro went over shows that the weather really didn't, as long as the track surface is wet, the weather really didn't matter. And by removing, or by lessening the rain, lessening the puddles, it was easier for me to line the cars up. I went for a real challenge next, Lotus Exige, figuring that if this one could go over here, then yeah, that would be a pretty good sign for for cars. This is where things start to get difficult. You see, in theory, the Exige has a lot of grip, which should be good for rolling it, but it is a wide, very low car, and sure enough, it's not really got any interest. It was getting up onto two wheels. The problem with this curb is while it is potentially violent enough to throw cars like this over, the bit that is possibly violent enough to throw the cars over is kind of a little bit way around the corner, and you just can't carry enough speed to hit that part. You just got to take, you haven't got the lines because of where the walls are, where the tyre bundles are and so on. You can't attack the part of the corner that you really want to with a lot of speed to try and get slightly more obscure cars to roll over. It's, yeah, not really ideal, this Porsche 928. Again, another one that I threw together. I thought this might actually go over easier than the Exige. Having seen the Camaro and the RX-7 roll, I thought this might actually stand a chance. This wasn't particularly interested either. It got a little bit close. I think with the 928, more time and perhaps a few tweaks with the suspension and the setup on the car might be able to get it to go over. It's vaguely plausible with the Porsche. It's doing a lot more than the Lotus ever was. It's still a very, very awkward curb to hit. It's annoying that you can't get any good replay cameras on it. It's just not quite ideal. I then had to go with an LMP car because I had one in my garage. Thought, why not give it a try, see what happens. Again, much like the Lotus, the hope with this is that there is so much grip in the car that you might be able to, if you get it up onto its side, you might be able to launch it over. But, you know, the normal curbs, it's just driving over as if they are, well, you know, just normal curbs. And on this particular rolly-tumbly one, it's still not getting... It just about lifted the wheels off the ground, I think, once or twice, maybe. It kind of bobbles a little bit, but it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen with those sort of cars. I went a little bit of investigate around this particular curb, and these are the curbs that we see around most of the tracks, these kind of serrated curves. I think you see them around a lot of, I say a lot around real world, so I think Formula 1 circuits tend to have these sort of curbs. And this is why we are having the luck that we are at this particular corner. When you're driving around the circuit in the wrong direction, these curbs are vicious. You can see the sort of serrations along it. When you're driving it in the correct way, why we're not seeing cars necessarily rolling when you're driving around the circuit in the normal ways, because they're a lot smoother. There's nothing to bounce the car into the air. The curbs are just too flat. The curbs are just too flat in normal driving conditions. From traveling in the wrong way, if you get lucky with the right sort of car, it is possible. I mean, I was I was sort of zooming the camera into the floor to show you how bumpy it is along here. It's, yeah, seriously bumpy for the cars to run across. And it's, if you get just the right amount of luck across this section, you can bounce the car over. Before I ended, I did want to see if we could get a vehicle to tumble over in the dry, so it was back to the Holden Ute, having seen the Tuareg and the Omni not really want to go for a roll. Thought we'd have a go with the Ute, and it sure enough was getting a long way onto two wheels. In fact, it would get up onto two wheels no problem going around a corner normally. You didn't have to touch a curb. It would wobble and wobble and wobble its way on two wheels. If you wanted to get it to go over in the dry, you did have to have some curb assistance. This time it was, you can see it's actually skidding along the road sideways, and it's finding enough grip to pick the vehicle up. It's strange. Very, very strange indeed. The way as you go around corners, it's wobbling. It's not particularly easy to get it around a corner without doing something weird, but to actually get it to roll over was not so easy. It does do it, but it won't do it. I say it won't do it consistently. You've got to have I think I had a little bit of luck. You've got to get it to dig into the road somehow. You've got to get it to dig in, and that is what will cause it to flip over, especially if you're trying to fight control of it and you slightly clip the grass, I think, as it tumbled over that time. Yeah, it will roll in the dry, but it is an awkward one to get it to go. Again, Forza Force is strong once more at stopping cars from tumbling over when it is dry. In the wet, some cars will. Some cars certainly will. Your sports cars, your supercars, your race cars aren't. I just don't think we have the curbs to do it. I don't think any of the curbs are violent enough to get cars. I tried a couple of other places. I went around Homestead a little bit, Virginia and so on, but nowhere seems to have vicious enough curbs to properly launch the sports cars, really. Anything that was low and wide, trying to get those to roll, I need a bigger curb to fire it up onto its side to get it started. Once it's on its side, I can, the rest will happen, but there isn't a big enough curb to do it. And yeah, using the serrations on that one particular Sebring curb works sometimes, but it's very iffy, and trying to get the line, certainly for the higher end cars, is, I just don't think, quite going to be doable. However, yeah, the good news is that there are certainly some cars, the good news for spectacle's sake anyway, there are certainly some cars that will go for some almighty rolls around these circuits, but once more, it is going to be confined to the wet weather. That, though, is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.